y'all. Welcome. I don't know why I even said that. Anyway, let me be natural. Here we are. Welcome to the Sheepamngwlvs podcast. My name is Louis Jetsika, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Sheepamngwlvs. And I'm here with a special guest. Oh, wait, let me not forget. Intro beat is provided by the State Music Group. I'll make sure I leave their information in the description. Feel free to check them out. This date on IG and different social platforms. I'll make sure again to leave their information in the description below. But without further ado, I have a special guest. I call him my friend. I consider him a special friend as well. Like Kamasse, a husband. I'm doing the full introduction for you, bro. Look, a husband, a
Appreciate it.
father, a full-on creative, owner of a manual process, a videographer, a photographer, a creative director. Man, I could go on and on and on, but welcome to the podcast. Thank you for allowing me to
Thank you.
to
Thank
have
you.
you on. Yeah. Look, like I said in the intro, I consider you a friend, so thank you for just taking some time out of your busy schedule to just spend a few minutes to just really share some gems. And what would you like to wait? No, actually, how can people get at you first of all, foremost, at the top of the episode?
Yeah, so firstly, thank you, Louis, for having me on this podcast. I'm honored as well. I can be reached at lightuptheworld at gmail.com. That's light up the world with two D's at gmail.com, just because light up the world with one D was taken. That's it. Um, or you can reach my Instagram at my real name is light. Um, Simply as that on Instagram. So yeah,
The reason why I brought that up first, I wanted people to get at you because you were the visionary behind the video I did for my Mother's Day project,
yes,
right?
yes,
And your creative direction and your keen eye to really illuminate what I brought to you. I brought to you just a skeleton of an idea, but you helped me put flesh and really crafted this idea and put it into fruition, right? So I think it's not by accident, like our paths cross, and I thank God for your creative eye, your endeavor, and just being a consistent person.
yeah, of course. And as I said in person, I just want to echo this. I thank you for even allowing me to, because I really pride myself in um, really just like collaborating with other people and bringing their vision forward. So it's always a great thing when the client respects your work enough to um, let you have full creative freedom, and you did that. Like, you provided a canvas, and I really just had to paint over. So I thank you for your willingness to work with me as well. And I think, or I know that that's one of my favorite projects, and I'm not just saying that. So if you're a listener or you're watching this and you haven't checked it out, definitely go check it out. It's inspirational.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for those kind words. I think the thing that really stood out for me and really echoes what God had told me beforehand, before even reaching out. Like, there's something special about you. And then getting to know you over the last couple months has been really grateful. The fact that not only you're like super dope as a creative, but yo, you're super dope as a person. I say that
Appreciate it.
because I say that because what I gathered from just looking from afar is consistency, right? Consistency as a friend, consistency as a husband, consistency as a father. And I'm wondering how you put your together, how you stack your days together to build that consistency.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to preface it by saying that I still got a lot of work to do. Like, you're your own biggest critic, or you should be, or at least, like, with constructive criticism. So it's like there's areas in my life where I feel like there's a gap, but I'm also not someone who belittles myself, and someone who thinks little of myself. Like, I think highly of myself, and I believe in things that I can do and put my hands together, especially when I trust, the plan that God has for me. But yeah, to answer your question, the consistency aspect is tied almost exclusively to vision that I have and what I feel like God is calling to me. So when I do things and when I put my hands on things, it feels as if like because this is something I strongly feel God wants me to do, it's bigger than myself, right? So there's times where I'm like, man, like, how am I gonna do this? And I really think about it. I'm like, God has given me so many resources and tools to be able to do these things. So thankfully for me, I'm privileged to say that like a lot of times it's just me thinking about the practical aspect, but the tools and resources are already there, so to speak.
Right.
So by like constantly thinking of like, okay, God, this is a vision you have for me, allows me to have sort of like a consistent goal as to the direction that I want to go with it.
No, that's powerful, bro. What as you're speaking, what really popped up to me was your consistency in your vision, right? So I can imagine as a creative, uh, how have you been able to be consistent as a creative? I know you're different. You have different lanes, right? So how are you consistent in bringing those visions forward?
Wait, sorry, Lewis, your video is turned off.
Oh, is it?
Is that okay? Yeah, I
Oh
can't
no,
see
no,
it.
it's all good. Oh really?
Okay, it's okay. Yeah.
Oh my bad. Yeah. Okay, so my bad. We got that sorted out. Okay. Yeah. So let me just repeat the question. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as a creative, how are you able to be consistent when you're not just one thing, right? And
Right.
I'm sure people like to box you into whatever lane they met you at. So
Mm-hmm.
how are you consistent as, hey, I'm all these things
Mm-hmm.
because of God's vision?
Yeah, so creatively, it's tied to the person. I would say, like, I think, I think it's a good thing being yourself, and I think that that is something that like a lot of us can strive to be creatively. And I say that because it's easy to have a different persona when you're in your creative bag, and then when outside of that to be someone else, right? But I think your creativity should be an extension of who you are as a person. So creatively,
Mm,
there's not that much gap because it's that's what I do in my alone time, right? Or like that's how my mind processes. So really, creatively, I'm just extending a part of my genuine self, um, creatively, right?
right,
And when I think of like all the things that I do, in my mind at least, they all kind of tie together and are intertwined with one another, right? So someone might see, oh, you're a photographer, but then you also do clothing. But to me,
right,
they share a lot of visions behind closed doors that like the client or my audience will not see, right? And some of that is intentional because I want them to be different brands. While I'm associated with them, I want them to have their own identity. So it's
right.
not like, oh, we're supporting this only because it's light. And I appreciate that, right? But I want my work to speak for itself. Um, yeah.
No, that's powerful. Could you tilt your video a little bit down?
Oh, my bad. My bad.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. I want to make sure we got the whole headshot. Yeah,
Yeah,
because that was
yeah.
the money shot. Um, honestly, what really comes to mind when you say these things, I think of visionary, right? You're a visionary in so many ways. And I guess what the question I would try to ask is, okay, as a visionary, right? You're not always going to have those good consistent days. So who is there for you when you're not at your best? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it that question is like a mountain in itself, because there's the correct way to say it, Like there's a correct way to respond, and then there's like the rough answer, right? I think I personally think that's the challenge of creativity, right? Because ultimately you have to show up for yourself more than anyone, right? So it's like because if you think of creativity, it's like it's so intertwined with yourself that like when you're not at your best, you can still create, if that makes sense. Like you can create out of like you think of Psalms, right? It's such a creative passage, and that shows you like a whole range of emotion that David experienced. You know what I mean? All the turmoils, all the highs, all the lows, but like it all comes into one big creative piece. Now, what I'm not using that passage for is almost like read Psalms as a way of like figuring out how to be creative because I think it's way more than that. It's pointing to Jesus, right? But I'm
Right.
kind of using that as an analogy. It was like we gotta get rid of the stigma that like, oh, I have to be a certain mindset in order to create, right? I think being vulnerable um, and making sure it's not premature is very important for our creative process. So like I'm my biggest cheerleader, right? Like I'm my biggest cheerleader. But outside of that, a lot of the critical um, outlook on my creative process, my wife is someone that while we're just having everyday conversation, she's kind of like able to tweak and refine my thinking process, right? Outside of that, I have like a selective group of friends that are critical in nature that like I'll throw an idea to and see what how they respond. But it's important for you to, and going back to what I was saying, it's important for you to have a vision. You don't have to be a visionary to have a vision, right?
Mm.
Um, but I think it's very important to have a vision so that even with all the critical things and all that, that you don't deviate from that vision, right? Because the issue with creatives all sometimes is like you just see the world as it is and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna go out here do this, but like there's no vision. So when you deviate from it, you don't have anything to go back to, right? So that's why within everything, like you have to make sure you're at a place to encourage yourself. And when you're not in a place to encourage yourself, then figure out ways to authentically create, right? Without joining the rat race of creativity. Meaning,
Wow.
like, sometimes what happens is you're like, oh, I have to create, I have to create. Well, no, you don't have to. Like, sometimes it's like, take a step back and, as much as that is a buzzword it is, take care of your mental health, right? Sometimes it's like the world, this might seem controversial, but the world will benefit from your creativity, but the world does not need your creativity. Like it's not a dire need where it's like the world can't function without your creativity. That's why it's a privilege for you to have people see uh, um, what you're about, and it's a privilege to let people into your world because the world will continue to circulate with or without it. You know, so the biggest thing is making sure you're, you're good and then creating out of that. But times that you're not good, having people that you entrust that will critique your work to a certain point, it's like the chef's kiss.
Mm. Man, I don't think you realize how powerful that was for me, and I'm sure that's gonna help countless others. I think what was at the top of my tongue when you were speaking was authenticity, right? I think of
Mm-hmm.
my journey to really submitting to Christ, and I think of who I was before resubmitting to Christ. I was really fake. I was not a consistent person. I used to lie
Mm-hmm.
constantly, and when I hear you, I hear a man who had community, who had support system in a wife, friendships, and what the takeaway from me when I grasped that is you're able to show up as not just your authentic self when you do take care of yourself, but also it shows up in your work. And
Hmm.
I think that is something that's going to stick with me long after we finish this call. But man, that is so powerful. Like, I'm really just lost for words right now.
Appreciate it, man. I think it's overall like we as human beings should help each other, and it's great that like God didn't create each of us with knowing everything, you know. But it's like there's a lot of things that even through this episode, it's like there's a lot that I have learned and will learn, and I think that's the beauty of like humankind.
Man, I think what really sticks out is from the short time I've known you is the consistency of God's word in your life, right? Like you said just a few minutes earlier, how the Psalms can be useful in really showing the essence of human nature, but also
Hmm.
showing the nature of Jesus. And I feel
Yeah.
like you do a good job of that in your work, in your photography, your videography, and whatever creative endeavors are led to that. What is your creative process, and how does that connect to the Word of God?
So funny enough, that's a journey that I'm on currently, um, because we know God to be a creator, and we know that we were created in His image, right? And because of that, we mirror some of that creative aspect, right? Like we're able to create life, you know, like things of that nature. But ultimately, He's like the creator, you know, like there's nothing new under the sun. So it's like sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, look, this idea, but it's like the idea is not new. It's just the way it's expressed might be new to us, you know. So I preface what I'm about to say with that because it's very important to remain humble through any creative endeavor. It's very important to understand that, like, ultimately, this is just part, a small part reflection of a bigger God who's able to create these mountains, these people, these landscapes, all of that, you know. But practically, what my creative process looks like is I would say that it's unconventional. Because like I will just like I'll be taking a shower and I have an idea in my mind. I'll be driving and I have and I think that comes from like just taking and stop looking at the world and appreciating, you know, what God has created. I tend to find inspiration in a lot of things, and maybe that's because I have uh, you know, all sorts of hobbies. Maybe it's that's my upbringing. Maybe that's the community in the DMV and how diverse it is. But I find creativity in a lot of things. So practically break it down. I let's say I think of an idea. My best friend is my notes app, where I'll just jot the idea down. I made this joke with someone before. It's like if you were to look at my notes, it just is like you almost have to try to decipher what I'm talking about, but to me, it makes sense, right? And it's like that because it's like it's kind of sporadic. Like I think of something and I jot it down, and then sometimes I don't even revisit it till like years, and I'm like, what was this again? And then like something clicks, and I'm like, oh, that's when I was thinking about this. But what that helps you do is it allows you to vet through what will actually stick, because not every thought or creativity um, or creative thing that comes to mind you should just go and do, you know. And that's a challenge for myself. But like by whether that's in notes, whether whatever that looks like for you, the listener or watcher watching this, I'd say you know compile them somewhere so that you can vet through like you know, maybe this was just a spur of the moment thinking, maybe this is something that will take way more time and resource than I can imagine, but like it allows you to just have like a group of things that you can just pick out of like, okay, I think I'm onto something here, let me see how it looks like when I, you know, flesh it out. So I would say that is important. I would say whether you're a graphic designer have experience in art, there's so many tools online that you can kind of visually try to bring about what it might look like, even at its inception, right? So things like Canva, things like Adobe Express, things like, I mean, so many apps. When you think of a design or you think an idea that needs sort of like visuals, like just go on those, or even stock photos, right? Go to like a stock photo place, gather some photos, and kind of compile like a mood board, if you will, of ideas. And then, yeah, execution, and the execution part is it's important, but it's not as important as we think. Sometimes you just have to execute it, even if it's not the best. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying execute it and put it into the world if you're selling something, right? Because I think you should go through a refining process. But some ideas, just treat them as passion projects, where there's no expectation. So once you release the project, um, allow yourself to be critiqued, execute it at least to your best ability, but understand that like it's a process. Like your best yesterday is not going to be your best tomorrow, but what matters is like, okay, like yesterday I lacked the ability to, you know, edit the photos this way. Today I'm able to figure out how to edit based on this skin tone. Tomorrow I might be able to teach a course on this. You know what I mean? Um, just to say like it's a process, right? So if it's a passion project, just execute it, yo. Just like, and I'm preaching to myself because I have a lot of
Man,
ideas.
you
I'm like,
preaching to me,
oh,
dog.
I'm
You
not.
preaching to me.
Like this podcast, we talked about it a bit, and I'm proud of you for it. But it's like you're executing it. You'll always find things that you could do better. But you know what? I would argue that that actually is something that your audience wants to see, right? Your true audience, it's a flex to them when they see how you started small to where you'll be in the future. So it's like taking them behind closed doors, or I should say behind the stage, and showing them the process, from where you were to where you are now. It's something that, you know, they appreciate. So yeah.
Man, listen. Man, listen. If the Holy Spirit wasn't speaking through you right now, bruh, because there were times where I was like legit kind of like tearing up. I was like, dog, he's speaking to me right now, dog. He really speaking to me right now. I don't know why I lean back. You were speaking to me. You, nah, for real. Because like I think for me, I'll speak for me, right? The
Hmm.
hardest thing is executing to the level you thought it was gonna be, and
Yeah.
then it hits you. No, what hit me was like what you just said a few minutes ago, a couple of minutes ago. Just sometimes hobbies can be hobbies, and if that's the case, let it be the case, right?
Hmm.
Because some things, and you're the king of this, right? Some things take scaling, right? And
Yeah.
that grand idea you had in your head, that might be like in 10, 15 years. And and you gotta start somewhere. And I
Yeah.
appreciate what you're telling me, right? The audience and people like authentic products, right? So when they
Hmm.
see the stages you took for you to level up, so to speak, that brings a certain connection in what you're
Right.
presenting. So that for me, thank you for blessing me with that word.
Of course, my guy.
Look, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'm gonna
No, bro, we're on your time, man.
look. I'm gonna ask one last thing, right?
Hmm.
For you as a creative, and for you as a creative, what can we expect from Light in 2023, or yeah, from the remainder of for these last few months?
Jeez, bro. Yeah, so as I told you, I'm working on my own podcast. It's funny that I don't know if by the time that this is released, it'll be out yet, but funny enough, it's also creative in nature, right? It's called the creative aspect. Um, and, that's something that I plan on releasing. Um, I plan on reintroducing my clothing line manual process. And then I have other ideas that I'll talk to you behind closed doors, just because I need to, just kind of pray on it and really, assess like how I'm going to tackle it. But outside of that, rebranding my photography business to cater to specific needs, um, really taking a step back and focusing on like the skeleton of my endeavors, if that makes sense. So like the structure and all of that. Because in everything you do, customer service has to be key. And there's gaps that I felt like I could close if I were to take a step back and really assess. Because it, life isn't just about do. It's like the creative process is not just like, oh, I'm just gonna do. And it's funny because sometimes it almost seems like it's ironic in nature because it's like I said earlier, just go out and create, right? Um, there are times where you just go out and create, and there's other times where you take a step back and be like, okay, I may need to focus on this part first. And that's why I said the disclaimer that you kind of need to able to identify what is a passion project and what is like a professional project, right? That you're doing for a client. When you're working for a client, you gotta give them the best. But passion projects allow yourself to take a chance, right? Allow yourself to be risky, because the rewards are greater than the chances you're taking when they're passion projects, right? But for the sake of the client, make sure that like you um, you put your best foot forward, you know. So yeah, those are some ideas that I'm thinking of the remainder of this year, and a lot of it will obviously continue through 2024. But the big thing God has been highlighting for me is the importance of um, other people in your creative endeavors, right? Because um, I used to be very, um, and I don't even know if it's out of pride or if it was out of like worry, but like I used to be very like, oh no, like I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, you
Been
know,
there.
yeah. Since I had like, especially since I had, my kids, I'm like, yo, I don't have time to do this. I don't want to be that guy who's always on the road, who's doing stuff and can't spend time with family. So I'm like,
Man.
in order to really make space for those things which are more important, like I'm gonna need a team. So um, it's been kind of assessing and looking in-house, quote unquote, who some of those people might be and how to approach and you know what their expectations will be, what mine will be. So if I had to summarize it's kind of like these next few months are formative to like what the next 2, 3 years will look like.
Hmm.
And it takes discipline, structure, and figuring out who the team players are going to be.
No, thank you. I think that humbled me as well. I think sometimes you always feel like, yo, God gave me the vision. I need to be the captain. I need to
Hmm.
control this. You know what I mean? It's like what you just spoke right now. I feel like a lot of people have been struggling with, right? Whether it's pride or whatever you want to call it, but that sense of it's mine, right? That selfishness of saying it's mine. But then this is a gift. Your vision is going to be a gift for all. So you in the hiring process, you sharing it to the world, is gonna be a blessing to all the people who are impacted by it.
Yeah, because like if you think about it and don't hear what I'm not saying by this statement, but it's like when you create, it's not really for you, right? Like, yeah, it partly is, but you're not the consumer. You know what I mean? Like, what you created was already in your mind, so it's almost like you didn't necessarily need to flesh it out, right? But when you create, you're creating really for the mass. Otherwise, why not create content and keep it for yourself, right? Instead of sharing it. We share because um, we care about the opinions of others too. Like if we're just gonna keep it a buck, you know what I mean? It's
Keep it a
not
bug.
because otherwise, like record a really cool music video or a film and then just keep it on your phone and only watch it yourself. Right? No one's gonna do that, right? So I mentioned that because if we know that we're largely creating for other people, like it would only make sense to take their opinions into consideration. So maybe not just enact, right? Because you will find in the creative space, people will like you'll be able to weed out fairly quickly like what is constructive criticism versus what is like, yo, you don't know what you're talking about, you know? Like someone will someone will pull up on you and be like, yo, you know what, man? I think when you record, you should put on a hat that says your logo. That then like there's flashing lights behind you, and you're like, okay, cool, you know, and
Oh
just keep it moving.
man, oh man. I feel like I've definitely I'll put my hand up. I've definitely given unsolicited advice before, but I love that story because every time you tell it, not that story, that example. Every time you tell it, I'm always reminded that one person's opinion isn't gonna change the whole vision of this. But I always
Yeah,
love it when you bring that up because it's a constant reminder to me, and I'm sure it's going to be a constant reminder to others as well. To the fact that one one opinion about something small is not going to change the overarching vision of whatever you're creating.
exactly, exactly. And that's why it's important to have the different buckets, you know, like have the buckets filled with like, you know, this is something that I'll give a thought to. This is something that I'm going to do, and this is something that respectfully it's just not part of my vision, you know. Having those three buckets and knowing what to put, like what advice, quote unquote, to put in them is very imperative to the success of whatever you're going to do or what you're doing.
Just going off script a little bit. I know
Hmm.
ball is your favorite sport. Growing
Uh-oh.
up, growing up, what what lessons do uh hooping or
Hmm.
just watching basketball in general teach you in terms of just being consistent?
Yeah, so full disclaimer for the sake of my friends that are playing overseas and all that. I think I'm a hooper, but when I play against them, like they're just on a different level. So um, I'm laying that down so people don't think, oh, he was out here trying to cap and say he was what he's not. But I mean, there's a lot of important lessons sports in general can teach you. I think discipline is a huge one that arguably you can't learn the same way in other facets of life apart from sports, right? Basketball specifically, since that's what, you know, the topic we're talking about, teaches you teammate, teaches you how to be reliable, right? You think of like last minute shots, there's a reason why, like, there might be one, you know, or two people on that are your teammates that you trust the ball to be in their hand in the last seconds, right? Because it's that reliability factor. Discipline. There's a reason why it's highlighted those who come to practice before everyone else and those who leave after everyone else. Consistency. There's a reason why, you know, Steph's ability to shoot is tied to how many shots he takes or how many threes he takes a day, right? So all those things, like they're just life lessons, but um, within sport, you know, the sport world, if you will. But basketball, man, it teaches you a lot because I'll give like I'll use an example. So like I started dunking, I think when I was 17, right? But to get there, it took me wearing ankle weights literally to everywhere outside of when I would sleep, shower, uh, or drive. I don't think I was driving yet. But yeah, but like, and because of that, like my bounce got to a place where amongst my peer, like I didn't find that many people that could jump as high as me, you know. But it's because I was consistent with, again, vision. The vision that I had in my mind is like, man, I want to be able to dunk, you know what I mean? And because it was tied to that, I was able to discipline myself in wearing the ankle. It's literally walking to work, or walking to home, walking to school, going to church, exercising. Like I had the ankle weights on, um, and it helped, and not even helped, but it achieved what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? When I started dunking, none of my friends, immediate friends at least, could dunk. You know, and even now, even though I'm about to be 31, it's like I see that discipline that I had working on my bounce still helps me in today's game transition. You know, I may look different on the court now, but it's helping me in this season of life. And so, if you were to use that as an analogy, it's like some things that you work on, the discipline that you have today, will help you even if tomorrow you're not at your best, right? Because the discipline that you've instilled can translate and transcend through like um, different seasons, right? As Christians, we say uh, it transitions well into different seasons of life when you're not at your best, you know. So creatively, if you're disciplined right now to be like, you know what, we'll create one piece of content every week, right? That's just an example. When you don't have time to create one piece of content a week, you'll be able to still have the back of your mind that like because I did that, right? I may need to scale it back to maybe creating, you know, a content every other week, right? But the discipline you had when you could do one content a week, it's gonna help you carry through this new season where you don't have enough time to do it. If that, so you'll be able to kind of assess where you're at right now and be able to see, okay, how does that look in this season? You know, and as you pointed out, I'm big on that scaling back great visions because if you try to tackle a huge vision, like you're just gonna get stuck in like how. But when you scale it back and you think of, okay, based on the resources that I have right now, what can be achieved, you'll actually surprise yourself how much more is achievable, you know, with that perspective shift.
Man, look, there's like three, four sermons of that, an autobiography, a biopic, all in that clip. Thank
I'm the
you.
king of like giving you long answer for short
Listen,
questions.
that's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course, my guy.
Look, we're at 38 minutes right now. Let me first, not first, finally close out by saying thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for being a caring friend. Thank you for being an example of what a husband, a father is, as well as just like a modern creative and all that's going around in this world. So thank you for just being you, and don't think that what you do is looked down upon. Like a lot of people, such as myself, we look up to what you're doing and keep at it. Thank you.
Man, appreciate it, man. Appreciate the flowers.
So, audience, thank you for tuning in. Follow, like, subscribe, review, what
All of it.
all of it, right? All the 5 stars and whatnot. Nah, thank you, Light. Appreciate you.
Of course, my guy. appreciate you again. Thank you for having me on this great podcast, and I know that great things will come out of it.
No, I appreciate you that. I appreciate you, dog. I appreciate you. So I'm closing out. All right. See y'all.